Pick share screen.
Yep.
And let's see if I can do desktop. Tell me if you can see this. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we sure can, yeah.
All right, awesome. Let me try doing this. Better?
Yep.
All right, I'm just going to start. So what I thought I would do is just talk quickly to the first couple of slides since we have a time limit, right? And
yeah, you should
talk a little more to the design portion.
Yeah, exactly. About 15 minutes and leave us 15.
All right, great. So just to refresh, this project is about mobile application and designing a mobile application for students selecting a college major, because the selection of a college major is a critical decision, can be stressful for students, and there's limited skills and decision making for some teenagers at this age, having to make this decision, some inconsistent guidance and contradictory information for some students. So we're trying to figure out a way to help with this process. So the project answers the question, how can a mobile app for college-bound or undergraduate students assist in determining their ideal college major? And just to quickly review, I looked at information design, mobile app development, current methods and tools available, how teens use mobile apps, and decision-making theory to help inform my project. And what I did was basically try to design out how the app could function. I have a mock-up of it to show you tonight. So a couple things about the design. I incorporated a lot of the principles from this program throughout this project, including iteration, which is, of course, in the universal principles of design. I saw some of the apps that were out and available. They involved you're doing a behavioral survey or some quick survey, and then the app would or tool would produce a quick answer for you of what your major should be. And you didn't really have a say in it. You couldn't really influence it much, and you didn't really know what was happening in the background to give you that response. So I wanted to flip this design and enable the student and the user to have a lot of control and ability to explore. So this tool uses iterative exploration. They're going to look at different fields of interest and have multiple chances to select choices and drill into the information and to see it displayed visually as a triangle. So again, quick review, to do something like this where you're going to show things around a triangle, I used a weighting strategy. This is analytic hierarchy process from CITE, AHP, taking two items and giving them a weighting compared to other items. A lot of the research studies that looked at how students selected a major used a weighting strategy, so I adapted that to this triangle idea, with the idea that the app will know how to place things around the triangle using weights, and I'll show you that in just a sec. I wanted to give the students 3 frames of reference. Kids have different levels of readiness for deciding on a college major. They might know what they liked in high school, they might know a career they're interested in, and some will have done some research and know what a college major that they're interested in is. But either way, I'm going to let them pick 3 selections from a frame of reference that makes sense for them. But the output is all displayed in major field format, because what we ultimately want them to do is come up with a major from this. So we're helping them with the language in the tool. So in the background, there's multiple tables, but the main one is this purple one in the center of the slide, the major field table, and that's a huge table, and I'll talk to that in a second. But considering their frame of reference, if they ask for high school interest, to use that as their frame of reference. In the background, a table will just translate that to major fields, and similarly, careers will get translated. And I should mention that I have a Google Drive area that has all of this information in more detail. Simply for tonight, since we only had a few minutes to chat, I grabbed slides out of those presentations. There's one about how the tables work with examples, and there's also one about the mock-up of the app. So I'm going to show you some of that tonight. So what I thought I would just quickly talk about is how this major field table could get created. Because when I realized how many combinations that were possible mathematically, I was like, oh my God, how would you make this thing? And it was important to me to know it was doable. So I took a list of majors down one side, and then I flipped the list in opposite order alphabetically and put it along the top of this matrix. And then I looked for relationships across the two fields. So for example, here in this yellow, I have animal sciences and animal biology, showing that there's a high relationship between those two fields with a 4, whereas African languages and zoology don't have much to do with each other, so they would get a 0. And why am I giving them a score? I want to be able to lift these scores and these pairs using that AHP thinking and to make the master table. So I'm going to just show you that really quickly here. There are so many combinations of 3. If there are 170 majors, for example, at your university that you want to show this list for, there's 800,000 combinations of 3, which is kind of cool. But it makes for this giant table. So I was worried, Steve's kind of got me thinking over time about this whole, how does it work thing, right? So I wanted to make sure it was doable. So I'll show you on the next slide here what it would kind of look like for if the student chose agricultural business, vet medicine, and equine studies, for example, as their 3 areas of interest. The data in the table that's adjacent to that would look something like this, where you'd see kind of weighted relationships of things that are related to those 3 vertices. So in this example, these fields are all highly related. They all have stuff to do with animals and agriculture. So you could see every field is filled in the table. For a combination where there's less relationships, it would be more Spartan, but I wanted to kind of show you a fully populated example. So why am I making this table? I want the app to be able to grab right out of this table like a giant lookup table and then display information around the triangle in its right location. Once this table is created, you're able to do that. So the whole thing becomes a giant lookup table once the table's created. So I wanted to also show you some wireframe mockups. Again, I have a more robust presentation that shows it in more detail, but wanted to show you what I did in my project. So I called the wireframed app Major Connection. It's not a dating app, so I wanted to put a cap and gown hat, a graduation cap in the center of the logo. I chose these colors because they're familiar to teenagers in teen apps. And I also chose to show the triangle since it's visually displayed as data in the triangle later on. So in thinking about this, just want to share some ways of thinking briefly. I looked at teen app norms in the literature review. The colors that are frequently used are here in the figure at left. These are the most common apps, and with the exception of Scholly, they all use these colors, believe it or not. So it seems like the industry is sort of modeled into that direction. Almost all have a white background, except for Spotify, which is a music app that has a black background. And again, on the right, social networking, a lot of vertical scrolling, horizontal scrolling means different things in those apps. So I tried to use the same thinking for the scrolling in this app. A tap would say, tell me more. They do use lists in some applications for teens. When they do that, they tend to use a drop-down box, a roller, or a radio button. So I deployed that as well. And I also deployed the strategy to use cartoonified icons, and just a few at a time on a screen to simplify decisions. And that tended to be a trend also in those apps. One of the cool things I learned during this project was about wireframing. I'm really familiar with instructional design for a corporate audience. And what was cool to learn was that this is different in how you design, because it's all about the actions and interactions to start with the mobile app design, and then you worry about how it will look and feel. You have to kind of divide what you're designing up into the different interactions and actions the user will be taking. So it worked out that there were 6 kind of logical sections, if you will, of this app. A welcome and sign in, some way to survey them of what readiness list they wanted, telling them to select 3, visualizing it, giving them some details about their different majors, and then some sort of what's next transition from the app to their next stage in the college search process, because this app doesn't solve all their challenges. It's really focused specifically on selecting a major, because that's actually a niche where there isn't a lot of assistance. Something else I did, trying to have a frame of reference for myself from other things that I've done, was use like a hierarchy to start thinking about the pathing. And again, unlike instructional design, the action flow are nonlinear in an app, which was also very cool to design for. And there's also this idea that a new user is different than an existing user, because a previous user has knowledge of the app and knowledge of how to interact and doesn't need as much instruction, but may want to come back to where they were or come back to favorites that they had saved. And so you have to plan for that too in your design. So this is an example of how I sort of thought about a new user and what they might like to do in the app. So a couple slides from the mockup. This was used, I used a tool called Power Mockup, which is a PowerPoint add-in, which is actually spectacular and very quick to learn and very easy to install. So again, looking at how some of the teen apps look and work, they have a splash screen and then a sign-on. I would want to capture login information if possible, so that I know if they've been there before. Also, teens have a tendency to want to share information with others, like, I'm on this cool app and I'm doing this thing and it says I should be a doctor. Isn't that cool? And so I have that sign in at the beginning. And then I thought the app would need to onboard them and do what's called progressive disclosure, which seems to also be a design pattern that several people that I was following mentioned. I was following Nick Babich, who was a UI designer for mobile apps. I found him to be really understandable for a new person coming into it, and having terrific advice and information about designing for mobile apps. And so I used some of the advice from his blogs, but essentially you would orient the person by welcoming them and then kind of progressively giving them more information. So I say we start with 3 questions. Why would you choose a college major? How does this app work? And share some examples. And this is, again, leveraging an instructional design technique of personas, where you would give, 1 to 3 case examples of an actual person or a fictitious person, how the app worked for them, how they kind of reasoned out, Elena is interested in science and she's using this app, and, here's what she does and concludes through use of it. And this personifies the experience for the users before they go on. An existing user would not necessarily need to see the personas, but a new person might. So this idea of selecting 3 things from their frame of reference, again, their high school, career, or college major interests, again, with those kind of cartoonified icons, so it's friendly, it's not scary. This is already a stressful thing for kids, so trying to take some of that out. Let's say they chose college majors, they could then be presented with this type of a roller where they could pick 3 areas of interest. It would tell them what they picked and then offer them the chance to map it. And it could look something like this. Interesting, enough, for some of the adult apps and the things I read in the mobile community about this, they hate reorienting the screen as adults, but kids have no concern to do it, and frequently do in their apps. So I decided to take advantage of that. I made the fonts a little bit larger for our examples here so you could see them, but I'd like them to rotate the phone to see the triangle in a little bit bigger size so they can actually tap on, the information that gets presented and drill down and see more information like you see here. Pathobiology, for example, in detail. I think students would want to know what courses could be included in the major too, not just what is the major, but what would I have to take to get that? So I did that reorientation for readability. I started out in my early mock-ups talking about favorites because that's a common term in some of the teen apps, but as I got further into it, I realized that favorites are a really fleeting thing to a teenager, and I didn't want it to feel like the decision they were making was fleeting in this case. So I went with a shopping cart, even though they're not technically buying it. I feel it's familiar to teens. It's more implied that something's held for them. And I know from my own daughter and her friends, they frequently go out on sites and sort of dream shop and put things in carts when they have no intention of buying them, but they do it. And so I went away from emoticons or favorites or social media likes. Again, a like might be for something you didn't create, which I really want them to feel like they're creating a solution for themselves here. And they don't even know what that diskette icon is, which is kind of funny, but So transitioning out of the app, I thought I would talk about that as well. Certainly they can, select as many groups of 3 that they want and drill into things. They can save the description. They could save the grouping of 3 so they can go back to that visual quickly with all the choices around, if they want to show a parent and say, hey, I kind of think I like pathobiology and here's why. And I thought that would be really powerful. But the what's next part, being a mom, I guess I really wanted to help them a lot at this point, but there's not a lot of space in this tiny screen. And a lot of this information is very textual in nature. So I decided to use these kind of fly out accordion boxes where you could, take each step one at a time. I also wanted them to be able to email it to themselves or to someone else, like a guidance counselor, and say, I'm filling out my checklist here in Major Connection, and I liked these options. What do you think? And then I also think transitioning out, they'd want to get some sense of what's next so they're not hanging. So I kind of took the most common things from my own experience with my teenager, but also some additional teenagers here in town that I've helped with using kind of a model like this to pick their major. And then I thought there'd be some kind of exit screen. I don't know if the technical term is reverse splash screen or what it is, but kind of hand them off when they actually are done. I think this is an app they could come back to many times to iteratively search, and I don't want to minimize that because I think that's actually one of the strengths of this app. But I also don't want to have them have no guidance after they leave. I think that's important too. So I did that. And then I felt like the future research, and I mentioned this in my literature review, would be certainly love to see a working prototype be made for this. SUNY has hundreds of wonderful majors. That would be a very rich environment for an experimental list to try this. And certainly get user feedback and testing from something you can actually hold and use. I think there also is a challenge with persistence for teenagers to stay in an app and keep trying things. I actually did seriously look at gamification for this app, but I went away from it based on actual teenager feedback. They felt this is an important decision. I thought my daughter was just saying that initially to impress me, but As it turned out, everyone that I talked to about 7 teenagers. One is in high school now, and the rest are in college as freshmen. And they do understand this is a serious decision. They're very aware of the cost of college and other things. And they didn't want to play a game. They didn't want to go on a quest and get reward points or anything like that, because they didn't look at that this way. So I thought that was kind of cool. And I really would love to know if trying to plug this gap does affect student college outcomes. What's their, continuance in the major they picked? Did it work for them? Were they able to stay in their major when they got employment because they picked a major that really resonated and they were able to persist in it? So I think that would be super interesting to know as well. And I know a lot of the research studies struggle with following the student all the way through to graduation, and did they succeed in landing in their career that matched their major, because that makes actually a huge income impact on them. So I know I raced through quite a bit of that. Happy to answer more in-depth questions that you may have.
Thanks, Jane. I think that was really very nicely presented, and I think your project is fascinating. I enjoyed reading it and seeing your presentation of the wireframe. I also really liked the way that you connected the various parts of the program, so that you in your information design, and then you did some sort of algorithmic thinking, and I just think I think your app is actually really cool, and I really enjoy the work that you did on the triangle, because that's a different kind of, that's like information architecture work that I think is really interesting to see, and it would be quite interesting to see it applied. So thanks a lot for all your work.
No problem. I really enjoyed it. I was laughing that every course that I took in this program had something to do with this in a lot of ways. So I really thought it was a great fortuitous thing to have this project.
I did see small pieces of Tiddlywinky in there.
Yes, and web sphere analysis,
but definitely, and I saw, but the instructional design. So it's really nice. But others want to jump in and ask questions. Feel free.
I had a couple of comments. Congratulations, Jane. I thought that was really, really well done.
Thank you.
And the perfect length. I love the name of your app. I don't know how I didn't catch that sooner, or maybe it wasn't done sooner, but I think it's the perfect name, and it's kind of catchy and wonderful. I think with your defense of your proposal, you kind of convinced me that I don't have to worry too much about the risks of this. And then today was even more like you thought it through. You're not trying to stuff students into just a few majors. You're trying to, spread out their options and not. So I thought that was really convincing. And part of that is the confidence and professionalism with which you present yourself. So that was really great. I love the way in the app that you tell the students what, you ask the students what they want to select their major based on, if they want to do it based on their high school experience or their career path, because it could have been hidden, and it's so much better that you said, okay, what do you care about? And this is what you're going to do. So I read through your literature review pretty carefully today, and I thought it was probably one of the most thorough that we've seen in quite some time. There are a couple things that I would suggest to everybody. One is just to check for typos. If you read it out loud, you'll probably catch them. So I noted they were really tiny things, but I noted them, and I'll just send them to you in a,
Thank you.
In a file. Your abstract cited the benefits but didn't say anything about those risks or limitations, and so I thought you might want to look back through your abstract. But now that I say that, I realized that what I was reading was your literature review, and as I read through it, I think, if I understand correctly, it's the literature part of the project, but there are maybe some parts that will go in there. Like for methods, for example, I was sort of struggling with, is this literature review about the methods, or is this just your methods section? Because in every single part you put in the literature.
Okay.
So I was sort of waiting for you to say, okay, this is what I did. And you did, but you were putting it in a context. It was interesting. I just wasn't quite sure whether you had come to that final step to making it look like other people's thesis projects. One really small thing I noticed a couple times, you had a citation from 1999, which is fine, but it's a little bit out of date now, because I think with this, the way students choose their major has changed since then. And so if you want to use the 1999, you probably also want to use a newer one in the same parentheses, just to kind of show people, because I know you have so much literature that was more recent.
Okay.
But that one seemed to, I don't know why, it just sort of got in my bonnet.
Search mechanism, though, wasn't it?
What did you say?
But that wasn't on majors. That was on like searching, I think.
Well,
anyway, yeah.
Oh, so yes,
so you noticed it too, though.
Yeah, it's
No,
the AHP method was created in 1999.
I'm sorry, I can't hear Steve.
Okay.
I think he invented the thing.
Yeah, he did, 1999.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that isn't an issue.
Yeah, no, I don't think. No, I mean that's cool. I think it's very cool actually that you tracked it back there.
Okay.
The original citation for that. So. Yeah.
Okay, so the rest I'll just send to you in a file, Jane.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but I think this is so promising, and I hope it does continue to the next step. I'd love to see a prototype. That would be wonderful too.
Oh, thank you.
Jane, and I'll have some suggestions for you too. I read the document with the running head, improving student selection of college majors. So I think, yeah. And the most recent version, I think it's, and this is also for Danielle and Daniel and Joe's, I haven't gone through as carefully. Think about what this document does. And so I think that several of you could use some minor reorganization of it. You want to have an introduction that tells about your project and why a person wants to read this. So they want to learn about all the different things in the beginning, and then you jump into your literature review. Because you don't really know why you're learning this literature or why you're reading about it, or where you're going to get to. So that would be one suggestion, is to bring one of your, basically I think it's the first section or so under the project, maybe just the first, or some of them up into the introduction a little bit. And so I'll write you a little bit about that. And I think in that document too, I think unless I missed it, it looks like figures 1 and 2 are repeated or something.
All right, I'll look it up.
Figure 1 and figure 2, I think, are the same figure. And so I was not sure what was happening there.
Okay.
Yeah, the yellow background, one of them, and the other one has a white background, but it's a blue triangle. And
I'll check it out.
Yeah, I have a sense that we're missing a figure, and I thought, but that was very cool. I kind of wanted to see the other one, so that was very technical. So,
okay, I'll make sure that maybe I didn't send you the exact latest one. Maybe I'll check.
It's the one in the zip file, so wherever it came out of the zip file.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that's an older one.
Okay.
All right, cool.
So I'll look at and then and your zip file seemed to work, and then we'll start working with the library to make sure that all works as well. So
yeah.
Yep.
So I'll finish that up this week and make sure that by the end of the weekend everything up there is the most current.
Okay. But I'm going to continue. If I'm going to mark up, I'm going to mark up that whatever's in that zip file. I'm not going to wait for another documents.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. Yeah, just so you know. Yeah, because I actually printed, which is different. So thanks.
Okay.
Anybody else? Any comments or thoughts? Anybody? Or
I know you want to move on. I'll just mention real quickly, I totally get the gamification thing, no problem whatsoever. Because I had mentioned that as a possibility, but you've explained that well. When we create apps in our undergraduate program, we use Adobe Muse, which uses all the Adobe products and pulls them together. Just for your information, if you're ever interested in creating an actual. The beauty of Muse is you create the same one for a desktop or a laptop an iPad and a phone. In other words, it gives you the layout for all three, and you put the. You know about that? So
Yep.
that's. I know you didn't want to go into costs, and that's fine. It's for a teenager. You want to give them the freedom to explore and decide what they want to like. I always, as a parent.
No, I get that. I get that. I know.
Yeah, it's fine.
A lot of the reviews said that the parents were actually the ones who squashed some things from kids right away. You know, you hear like, I want to do something that's not going to make any money, right? And your reaction as a parent is like, wait, I'm going to spend X and you're not going to, you know, make a lot when you're done. So one thing, and I might have done it overboard here, but I was trying to get the kids to have the ability to privately explore before they then go show someone who might diss it or attack it, right? But certainly cost is a huge issue.
Well, particularly since SUNYs are free now, if you're below a certain income, as long as you're willing to stick around after you graduate. But that's a big breakthrough, I can tell you, because I paid for it when I sent my kids to SUNYs. But you know, it's just, I can sort of see, plus a lot of teenagers, they may get scholarships. So it's really kind of unfair to limit them right away. So I'm not trying to say that, but I just know that the fact, you know, that I had to limit my kids' decisions in the end because I knew I wasn't going to put them $100,000 in debt. But that was just Cornell, and that was just
yeah. But Russ, I think this app would be really easy to add another layer to filter in and out certain colleges. So you only report majors that are in the colleges. So you could say, you know, you're only going to a SUNY school within 3 hours of our house. And then that app could just report on those majors. You know, you could do that.
Yeah. One of the exit strategies in
They
that.
might not want to do that, but that's who's going to buy it. You know, so you're probably going to limit the majors to the people who pay for the app. You know, if you're doing it in a commercial zone, it turns into college advertising, you know.
I mean, I will say, just FYI, I got a degree in English and I had no problem getting work. So it's not particularly limiting what you decide to do.
I
Well,
agree.
that's a whole other question about the major. You know, I was thinking that you could use these, what students I think will do is they'll put in things that they hate as well. So they stay away from majors. And when I talk to students about majors, I usually get them to try and, you know, like, well, do you want to, you know, eliminate whole clusters of majors? If it just is, you know, it's like, well, do you want to put your hands on people and touch them? You know, basically no. And then, okay, well, then you don't want any of these nursing things or, you know, so if you don't want to touch people, then you don't want a touching profession. You know what I mean? So that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So they could repel themselves from majors too, but that's kind of nice thing about a triangle.
Cool. Glad you liked it.
Yep, great job. Really good.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yep, please.
I want to correct Professor Khan. For making apps, you're going to want to use Adobe Animate or Adobe Flash Builder for the apps. That'll give you a true app. It'll allow you to pack it into the Adobe Air system, which will go on iOS, Android, and Windows phones.
Huh, you don't like the Muse?
Muse is just for web pages. It's not really good for an app because you can't go back and for the API, because you're going to need an API or you're going to need a MySQL database to do some of the stuff she wants to do. And unfortunately, you're really not going to be able to do that too much in Muse.
Yeah, our students just create portfolios using
Right, yeah. Well, we could definitely do it in TiddlyWiki. There's just no doubt about it, Jane.
That I knew.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
James. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Danielle, you want to grab the screen?